Good afternoon, and welcome to our webcast, 5 Habits for Acing the CFP Exam. My name is Jim Marr. I'm a professor and chair at the College for Financial Planning. I'm joined by my colleague, Cindy Rickey. Cindy?
Hi, everybody. We're really excited to bring this information to you today. I am, as Jim said, Cindy Rickey. I'm a professor at the college, and Jim and I will kind of guide you through some of the things that we learn as we have worked with CFP exam over the years that really make students successful with the exam.
Great. You want to just go ahead and dive right in?
Let's dive right in.
You want to tell them a little bit about today's game plan?
Okay, so basically what we're going to do today, we're really not going to cover any content per se, but what we'd like to do is cover some specific information about the CFP national exam. And then once we do that, we give you some of the specifics, then we'll be able to walk you through those 5 top habits for students that we've found really help them pass the exam for the most part. After that, at the end, we will, if you want to put any questions in the chat, we'll have a question and answer session, and so we can give you the information that you need.
Right, so like Cindy said, hold all your questions to the end, and we'll be able to get to those. We'll have plenty of time when we wrap up our presentation today. All right. So as you can see, we're going to talk about the CFP exam, and here's the scoop. Cindy?
Okay, so just to go over the exam dates, we've had a little bit of delay for the July exam, as you probably most of you know, due to COVID-19. If you are already registered, you're likely registered for the September exam, which would have been the exam for all of our July students who study with the July cycle, as well as a couple of days of the March exam. Those students will also unfortunately, the Prometric centers were closed down for the last 2 days in the March cycle. So there are actually some students in the March cycle that will be also testing in September. And you see the dates there, 22 through 29. So make sure you're registered for the exam and make sure that you actually have your spot saved. We'll talk about the administration of the exam in a few minutes. November 3rd through 10th is the next administration of the exam. And then March, the first one for 2021 is in March. And you see that that's the 9th through the 16th.
Mm-hmm. I would concur with this first bullet point. The CFP exam is not easy, but it's definitely passable. You have something you want to add to that?
Yeah, so both Jim and I have actually we've sat for the exam, so we have that exam experience. And so it's not an easy exam. If it were easy, a lot more people would take it, obviously. This is kind of, just think of it as any type of an exam that you've taken for investments, for example, or any other designation you've studied for before on steroids. So CFP is kind of the granddaddy of them all. It isn't easy, but the key here is to actually know how to approach your study. That makes it passable. But if you look at all of the components you have available to you to study, it can be overwhelming. So that's why we're here today, to let you know what are some of the things you can do. And then we do have a study planner checklist. I'll cover that in a few minutes to let you know how you should study and in what sequence. So it's
right, definitely. So basically, students shouldn't take this lightly.
No, you really should set aside some time. And when I say time, I mean a few months to say, okay, I'm going to, just sit down, I'm going to pass this exam, I've finished my education, or I've challenged the exam. I've taken my my capstone course, and now I'm going to commit the next 15 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever it is, to the exam. For me personally, I had small children at the time, so I had to make arrangement for them in some evenings and weekends and that kind of thing. So just make sure that you set yourself up for success by actually committing yourself to study for the exam, because you really don't want to take it a second time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the exam, as you may already know, is a 6-hour, 170-question exam. All of these questions are multiple choice. You will have either 1 or 2 case studies on your exam. That varies from exam to exam. You'll find practice in your book 7, which is the case study book that we make available through our study program. You'll be able to work through several case studies there to get used to that. There are 2 3-hour sessions, so it's one day, 3 hours in the morning, followed by a mandatory 40-minute break. So you get up, you stretch around, go back to your locker if you're physically taking the exam at Prometric, eat a snack, get some water, and then come back for your second 3-hour session.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about the CFP exam is a lot of it is not going to be knowledge recall or remembering definitions and that sort of thing. Some of it is, but most of it is actually applying these concepts to real life situations. So you might be given a quick little set of facts in a question stem, and they ask to apply what you know to that particular circumstance. So just know that it's not going to be, as you would see maybe on a securities licensing exam, a lot of recall. You're going to be asked to apply the things that you learn, and the study planner that we provide and all of the study materials are centered around that application type of learning.
And to reiterate, it's more application than recognition.
Yeah. Okay, so most of you are probably familiar with the principal knowledge topic list. The one for these upcoming exams is actually the 2015 list. So just know that that is the correct list to use. CFP board actually does a survey to update their PKTs every 5 years, and they are in the process of doing that now. So we'll probably see a new list sometime next year. But for purposes of this exam that you'll be taking, if you do take the exam, we have percentages of the exam that is applicable to each of these 8. There are 8 PKTs. Now, for the first 3, we lump those together in book 1. 7% for professional conduct and regulation. That's going to be your CFP standards and code of ethics. General financial planning principles, that's the financial planning process. We have a little economics in there. There's things about banking. You're going to learn about balance sheets and income statements and that kind of thing. So that's your general financial planning principles. That's 17%. And then education planning is another 6%. That's going to involve calculating education planning needs, know about education credits, other legislation, and that sort of thing. So knowing that these are your general topics, sometimes we refer to them as fundamentals, it really is almost a third of the exam. So book 1, the information you have in your book 1 is actually going to, you're going to see that in 30% of your exam on average. Know that some of these topics, though, can bleed into the others, and that's the beauty of the application type of an exam, that you're actually going to still see that integrated with other topics. But for the most part, just for a general guideline, these 3 topics will represent 30% of the national exam.
Cindy, do you want to talk a little more about the professional conduct we've discussed, memorizing the standards by like their letter name?
Yeah,
and
so
things like that?
if you're familiar with the CFP board code and standards, or standards and code, I should say, if you're familiar with that, then you will know that there's a lot of text, first of all, but there are several sections that address different parts of the financial planning process and how financial planners should conduct their business and what the requirements are as a CFP professional. You will not need to memorize different sections like section 2.6. You just need to know overall what the standards are. You won't have to memorize them in a list or anything, but you're going to see those in applications. So you may see a little case study facts in a question stem, and it may say, what principle was violated in this situation, or under this code of, confidentiality, what would actually be specific to this case. So don't worry about having to memorize anything, but do make yourself familiar with the code and standards, and know that we have a copy of that on our dashboard available to you. And in the study planner checklist, we do recommend that you just go through it a few times as you study.
Right. And another good example of that too is knowing who the client is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to risk management and insurance planning.
Okay, so risk management is not always insurance, by the way. So you'll study a little bit about what risk is, but you'll also study for the most part on what types of risk are insurable risks and how insurance can actually transfer the risk from you to an insurance company. We also cover employee benefits in this book as well, so you'll see that there. Totally combined with the risk management, insurance planning, and some employee benefits, it's 12% on average of the exam, and that's all covered in book 2.
Right. And when you say it focuses on the strengths and weaknesses and deficiencies in a person's plan, rather than just like a recognition kind of question, once again, like what a certain policy is.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you'll look once you study, you'll see where you've got different risk management techniques. You'll be able to see where there are cases where an individual might want to just retain the risk. Others will say, this is a type of a catastrophic risk that you're going to absolutely want to transfer to an insurance company. So it's going to be a lot of application as well.
Right. All right, moving on to book 3, investment planning.
Okay, so investment planning is just about everything you need to know about investments. You do learn about the various types of investments. You learn about performance measures. You learn about standard deviation and beta as a measure of risk. And here's where you will have some formulas that you'll have to know to be able to calculate certain yields or other certain measurements of risk. So know that for this, the board actually does provide you with a formula list or a formula sheet that you have available to you electronically online when you take the exam. So you are given the formulas, but it's up to you to be able to identify the correct formula to use for a particular question.
Right, like trying to differentiate between Sharp and Trainer and Jensen, knowing how to apply the CAPM, capital asset pricing model, also being able to identify when to use the constant growth dividend discount model, and especially the multi-stage dividend discount model. Knowing how to do that process would be important for the exam.
So here is where you actually, memorization might be a good idea. So what we do in book 3 is for those formulas, if you look at the appendix in the back, we give you the form that you'll see when you take the exam. We also give you a labeled form. So if you look at that and you try to memorize or identify the different formulas, then you'll have that prepared for when you take the exam. So you may be able to identify a lot of the formulas just by the variables in the formula, but we do give you both of those options so you can be able to identify quickly when you take the exam and do that calculation.
Right.
Yep.
And then everybody's favorite, tax planning.
So you look at tax planning, and at first blush, you would look at it and say, well, it's only 12%. That's kind of low. But the reason it's only 12% is tax planning is probably the topic on the exam that threads through all of the other topics. For example, when we talk about insurance planning, you're going to actually see some content that covers the taxability of life insurance that's provided by an employer. That's really tax, but it's in insurance. So that's why it looks low there. There are tax subjects in all of the other concepts for education planning. You're going to talk about tax credits, and you're going to see taxation and investment planning, retirement planning, and then you'll talk about estate taxes. So it's 12%. That's pretty much tax planning standing on its own. So that question would actually be something about, say, for example, short-term and long-term gains as applied to a particular circumstance.
That's a great example, the knowing how to net, the netting process there.
Yep.
All right, what about retirement savings and income planning?
Okay, so that's another 17% of the exam. Here you'll learn about the various types of retirement plans, both qualified and non-qualified. You'll learn about defined benefit plans, defined contribution plans, profit sharing plans. Here's where you learn about traditional and Roth IRAs. That's usually a pretty big topic when it comes to the CFP exam. And then you'll also learn about some retirement strategies, and then we'll also cover Social Security and the retirement benefits through Social Security.
And lastly, we have estate planning. And as we move on to this, also it's important to know that they will be provided with the annual limits, correct?
Yeah, so not only will students have access to the formula sheet for the investment planning section, but you'll also have some of tax information available as well. We have that in the course on your course dashboard. If you want to download and look at that, that's what the board will actually provide to you when you take the exam. But you will see that the tax tables are a part of that. So if you have to calculate any type of a tax, a marginal tax rate for someone, say, you'll have those tax rates there. Estate planning, the same thing. You'll have your estate tax rates available to you if that's something that you have to calculate. But know that you will be responsible for knowing how taxable income and how estate taxes are actually calculated. So you'll have to know that basic formula. But once you get to the taxable amount, you will have the tax rates available to you, and you can apply those those percentages to the bottom line.
Mhm. Would you also say that when you're looking at estate planning, that a particular question when we talk about application would be, once again, looking at the client's deficiencies or making a recommendation? How would you piggyback on that?
So what you look at, let's just use estate planning as an example. You may look at a particular situation. Now, this could be in form of a case study, or it could be in form of like a mini case that appears within the question stem itself. If you do get questions like that, obviously the best thing to do is to read the question at the end of the question stem, so you actually know what you're being asked. And then you can go back and read through the fact set in the actual question itself. And that particular, if it's a set of circumstances for, let's say, an assumed client, then they'll give you information to where you can say, oops, they don't have any plans for guardianship. They have young kids. They need to do that. Oops, they don't have a living will. That might be important at some point. Oops, they don't have this title properly, because if it's titled this way, then it won't go from the husband to wife if the husband dies, and to the wife to the husband if the wife predeceases him. So you just want to look at that situation. And if you have that knowledge, you'll be able to put the pieces together and figure out what the best recommendation for that particular family is.
Mm-hmm. All right, moving on.
Okay, so just a couple of other things about the exam. I said before there are 2 sessions. Within a session, you'll be able to go back to questions. You can actually mark them for review, and you'll be able to move on and finish your exam and go back to questions. You do not have the ability, however, to go from the second session to the first. So those sessions are very, they're independent of one another. So just know that you, at the end, when you finish, you will not be able to jump to your morning session once you exit that and go into your break.
I'm sure everybody would like to see this.
Well, and this is a good thing, because way back when, Jim, you probably recommend, sometimes the questions were just merely trick questions. And when I say that, what we'd see this question stem with all of this like irrelevant knowledge, or not knowledge, but facts, and you'd have to kind of sift through to pick what you actually needed to answer the question. Not so anymore. So the CFP board realized that really didn't assess the knowledge at all, other than the fact that you can pick through a paragraph. So there really aren't any trick questions. So if you think a question is a trick question, my recommendation would be to go back and carefully read the question again and look at all your answer options, review those, and pick the best answer, because honestly, you're not going to see any trick questions. And a note that this is a pass-fail exam. We do get the question quite often, how is it graded? All I can say is, just to keep it simple, is that it is a psychometric process. The board actually uses what they call the modified Angoff process. If you want to Google that, you can find a lot of information about it. But there is a minimum competency for each exam that the board puts together. So it goes across all of the principal knowledge topics, and there is just a minimum competency, which is a cut score. So there's really no clearly defined score that's needed to pass. However, like I said, there is a level of competency that the board calculates, and you have to be above that level of competency to pass. You will get your pass-fail as soon as you complete your exam and you hit submit. A few seconds later, your heart will start to beat really hard, and you'll probably have to take some breaths. But you will actually get your score. It will be a pass or fail. If you aren't successful, you will receive a report that shows your low scoring areas, which is really a good place to start when you study to retake it. If that happens, which I'm hoping it doesn't happen for most of you, but if it does happen, please reach out to us. And when I say us, I mean through InstructorLink, to the faculty, because we can certainly put together a study plan for you specific to your low scoring areas. And then just to note, I'm sorry, Jim, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to finish up. So just for retakes, you have 3 takes within 24 months, and then you have 5 takes over your lifetime. So just keep that in the fact. Although you won't have to retake it all, because everybody's going to be successful, right? So
of course. And I was going to say, it's a little different now than what it was back in my day. It was 250 questions over 2 days at a location, and then we had to wait, what, weeks?
Oh my gosh, it was like painful. It was like 5 or 6.
you know,
In the
and
mail, in the snail mail.
yeah.
And you know what the hardest part for me and Jim was? It was actually that Friday night. We had a session on a Friday afternoon, and then we had to go home. And
Mhm.
it was just not a good thing. And then we had to go back and take two more. So,
I
yeah,
know.
it
Ours
wasn't good.
was, I
But
think,
it's a
Saturday, Sunday, but I don't know about you, but I remember getting a little slip in the mail, and it's crazy. You can't remember what you had for breakfast, but you can remember getting that
I can
slip in the mail
remember
and
too.
opening it up and seeing pass. And that's it. That's all you got. You
Well,
got
it
nothing
doesn't
else.
matter as long as it said pass, right? I mean, I got
I
it
know,
at my
right?
office. I can remember
Who
my hands were
cares?
shaking.
All right. So now let's
Yes.
move on to the exam encounter
Yeah. Yeah.
in the
Okay.
Prometric
So
Center.
this is some information about actually exam day and taking the exam. So there are two ways, as you probably know, to take the September exam. And I believe it's going to be the same way for the November exam,
Mhm.
and it's because of the pandemic. But the first is to go as you would have done before COVID to a Prometric center. So there's just some tips that students don't always think about that I'd like to list here, make sure you're aware of them so you have the best exam experience. The first thing is know where you're going. I can remember for me, I took it at a university and I drove to the university and I kind of drove around the campus just so I knew where to park, whether I had to pay to park, what building I needed to go to, and that sort of thing. Because if you get to a particular location, or you're not even sure where the location is, it might take you longer to get there and you don't want that to happen. Now we do nowadays have Google Map and Google
Mhm.
Earth, and you can probably do that. But if you're not that far away, then it's a good idea to know where you're going.
And that fits in right here with the arrive early.
Yeah, so arrive early is something I added to this because if you are testing with COVID being around, there are newer, more safer check-ins like everywhere else you go. So just make sure that you do arrive early. It's better to arrive early than to arrive late and not be able to start on time.
Mhm.
Take-ins, okay, you've got actually one take-in. You can take in your battery-powered non-programmable financial calculator. So then you will have that calculator checked visually to make sure that you don't have any formulas or answers stored in there.
One
And
that
make
looks
sure
like
that,
this,
yeah,
the
yeah,
HP
HP,
10B2 Plus.
yeah. And I use the 12C, but there are,
Mhm.
I mean, there are several approved. As long as it's not non-programmable, it's fine.
Mhm.
Also, though, some people took in programmable watches and they were asked to take them off.
Mm.
So you can't take into the testing site a programmable watch. You will be given a locker at Prometric. You can store all your other stuff in there. Make sure you take a snack. You might want to bring a bottle of water. All of that, including your wallet, purse, that kind of thing, can go into a locked locker.
Mhm.
Leave behind everything else.
Everything else.
Yeah.
All right. And then you have the option for also remote proctoring,
Okay, so
and
this is
yeah.
this is new.
Mhm.
And it's a little 21st century, but you do have the opportunity for promote proctoring, as I said before, for the September and November exams. Basically, what's required here, there are actually two requirements. One is you have to either travel more than 50 miles to the closest Prometric center, or you have a health concern that allows you, I mean, it does not allow you to travel to such a center. That's the first. So you have to be either or one of those. The second is you have to meet technology requirements. The good news is that CFP board actually has a link that you can test your computer to see if it meets the requirements.
Mhm.
Okay. Security and check-in, very comparable to the test center. You are going to have a check-in monitor, and they're going to check you in through both audio and video. So you do have to have that type of equipment to their standards. And then you are going to be asked to show your calculator and do all other kinds of things. And then they're going to take a sweep of the room to make sure you don't have posters with all kinds of information in your room and so forth. And one of the things that the board did stress is you cannot have anybody else in that room at any time. It invalidates the exam. So make sure you don't have a child run in the room at an opportune time or whatever. It's your responsibility to ensure no distractions. So Okay, to apply for this remote proctoring, there is a form that you need to fill out. It's a relatively simple form. I think I have a copy of it here.
Yep, it's
It's a
right there.
relatively simple form, yeah, as you can see. This is just the first step. So if you complete this form, you send it to the email address that is on the instructions for the form. I'm kind of guessing someone from the board will get back to you because this isn't a whole lot of information. Probably ask you some questions about how you qualify and that sort of thing. But this is the full application for remote testing.
And this is some of the things you've already touched upon, are the
Yep.
testing environment that you're using at being indoors and third parties.
Yep. So here's a list of what your remote environment needs to look like. I mentioned that it has to be walled, which is interesting. I mean, like, it can't be like a cubicle. It can't be outside, obviously. It's got to be walled, well lit, free from background noise and disruptions. We talked about that. I talked about the third party can't be present in the room or come in at any point during the exam. You have to be free of pens, paper, any electronic devices, cell phones, etc. Anything that you could not take into the Prometric Center, you cannot have around you if you're doing it remotely. You can't have any content that would provide an unfair advantage because you're taking it from home. And I mentioned that you're going to have a candidate person check done by a readiness agent, and they're going to take a full 360-degree sweep through your room. And you get to have 2 tissues. I don't know why they came up with 2
Just
or 1
2.
tissue.
You can have 3. You gotta have just
So
2.
you can't have a box of tissues, but you can have, I guess, hold up 2 tissues, and the
Yeah.
proctor's gonna look at your tissues. So I guess maybe people would think of writing notes on tissues. I don't know.
I
Somehow
don't know either.
you're allowed 2 tissues. So know
And to
that.
writing on tissues isn't always a good idea anyway. So
Uh,
let's move on to doing this and not that. So
okay,
some of
so
the
this
things
is
you
where,
don't want to do when you prepare and things that you do want to do when you prepare. So that's
okay,
number
so
5.
here is where Jim and I are going to share some of our stories. So be kind when you hear them. So we have the top 5. So I'm going to start off with 5. The first thing, or the 5th thing is, we're going to move down to 1, is don't move through without a plan. You just don't know how many students contact me, say 3 or 4 weeks out from the exam. It's like, well, I read this book and then I did the Q bank. I haven't gotten to this yet, but I looked at these, I listened to these podcasts, but I didn't look at these videos. You need to have a plan. That is extremely important that you move through with a plan. This was my plan in my
There's a
day.
plan.
I didn't have the benefit of what all of you have now, so I had to have this typed up plan so I could figure out how to work through my weeks. As you can see, I'm a color-coded person, but I like to check off a list. So this is what I did for me, and I have all of my stuff that I use for the exam. So, and I had my little dates. You can see next to it when I was going to study and so forth. And so this is no longer the case. What you do now is we provide you with a study planner checklist. And that study planner checklist is actually, we created that using learning science. So we didn't sit in a room and say, okay, let's read the book first, and then we'll send the students over to questions, and then we'll tell them to watch the video. We actually sat down with instructional designers and people in learning analytics to produce this study planner that you see right here. So this is just an example of what you would see if you downloaded your study planner checklist. We're actually going online with this in November, but for the September exam, you'll have this to download, and you can see the little checklist, the checkbox you can check off when you're done. But basically, this is a sample from one of our, I think it's from the on-demand class. The on-demand class is the one that you have the recorded videos versus the live classes. But you can see how every component you'll see on your dashboard for EPR is incorporated into this study planner checklist. So it says exactly in what sequence to do what. And we talked with our instructional designers and we walked through the process of how you study, and they would tell us, if you do the learning objective videos first, for example, and then students go to the Q bank, the retention will be much higher because they've just watched video. And before that, they did this, and before that, they did it. So there is a method to this madness. And so there is a step for each of the components.
I love number 4.
So this is me. This was me. So like I said before, I had 3 young boys when I studied for my exam. I was a single mom. So I get this bright idea that I'm going to study and I'm going to take them to Chuck E. Cheese because I can just give them tokens and they can just go play. I'm going to go in the pizza room and I'm going to sit in the corner. They had enough light for me to study, and I'm going to put in my earbuds and I'm just going to rock it. They're going to be a while and I'm going to study. So I'm
And
sitting there studying, minding my own business, and this mouse comes behind me and scared the heck out of me and wanted to give me a tea refill. I jumped, and this is what happened. And then before I knew it, the music started and all these characters started dancing around, and it just was not a good place to study. So that emphasizes the fact that you really need to find a place that works not only for you, but for your family, even your dogs. I mean, I didn't want to get interrupted by having to take the dog for a walk in between when I was studying, so I made sure I did that before I studied. But your family, you have to think about your family or your roommates or anyone else that's that lives with you, and just make sure that you're studying when they don't essentially need you. I know Jim and I did this to a certain degree. We went to where bagel shops. That was our thing back then.
Einstein's bagel.
Yep, and we got to know the baristas there very well. In fact, for me, they had my bagel and coffee ready when I walked through on a Saturday morning. So just find a place to study. It could be at home. It could be at a bagel shop. I've known people to study in actually locker rooms of health clubs. They have a little section there. Wherever you can find some quiet to be able to concentrate, just do that. Okay, so one of the things that's important here is to try not to memorize too much. You will know when you go through your study, your books, you will know what you have to memorize to answer the practice questions and what you don't. We'll actually call out if you need to know, like the steps in the personal financial planning process. We'll actually give you those steps, and then we'll actually have some practice questions in there to assess your knowledge of those. But the thing here is, as I said before, you want to focus on learning and applying. So what I did when I studied, I just didn't memorize yield to maturity, the formula. I actually sat down, and this is an actual page from my study notes. I actually visually, because I'm a visual learner, I actually drew that out. So I actually could understand what yield to maturity was and just not know the formula. Because I might get a question that I don't have to calculate it, that I just have to answer a question that would relate to something like this. So I had that up in my head because I actually focused on applying the knowledge. Okay, so that's just an important tip. Make sure that you apply them.
I just can't believe you've kept these all these years.
I know.
I think when I saw the past thing, I burned them that night. I mean,
I didn't. No, because it helped the students along the way. I mean, it really has. Well, it helps now, right? So, but the other thing I wanted to say is that on that note, before we get to number three, learning and applying, a great tool to use when you go through our study course is to make sure you listen to the podcasts that the faculty has created. Jim and I did some of those, and also the high five videos. Both of those are going to appear in your study planner. Watch them when you're instructed to do so. But those are really important because we're not really teaching the concepts, but we're giving you examples on how you may see the concepts tested on the national exam. So this is an example here of how it might be tested. So I just wanted to bring that in, that we do not only teach you the content, but we also give you ways that certain concepts might be attacked, it might be attacked this way, or it might be attacked this way, or it could be done this way. So make sure that you don't skip those steps. And then number two is to live in the Q bank. So many students have tried to treat the CFP exam like a securities licensing exam or an insurance licensing exam, where you go through a Q bank, you answer the questions, you get a score, you go back through it, you answer the questions, you get a score. The Q bank for CFP purposes is just a tool to learn the content. So it's important that you read, then you practice, then you go back and read and review. And that's all incorporated in the study planner checklist. But please don't make the mistake of going rogue on us and just living in the Q bank and thinking that you can pass, because students aren't that successful if that's all they do.
Right, you got to use all the tools. It's the books, it's the podcasts, it's the high fives, it's attending our new webinars on questions and practice questions and answers. It's doing a little bit of everything. Like we say, we can tell when students live in the Q bank.
Yeah, by the questions that they ask. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And of course, there's number one. I don't know about y'all, but I never procrastinate or anything or panic about
Yeah,
anything
right.
when it comes to standardized tests.
Well, so, okay, this goes along. So when I went to take mine, we're all herded into this hall and we're waited to be called in, to the
Yes,
test. You remember that experience, right?
yes.
And of course, I'm a nervous wreck, and it's like, do I know everything? Did I look at everything?
Mhm.
And they've got people in the halls, and I was tempted, but I did not give in. They had people in the halls that were actually looking through their books and trying to study at the last minute. Don't do that. Shut it down the night before. If you don't
Yes.
know it then, you're not going to know it. You probably know a lot more than you think you do. We find that with students
Mhm.
all the time, but that can put you in a really bad mental place, and you don't want to walk into your exam, or log into your exam not being in a good mental place. So you want to be relaxed. I actually tell
Mhm.
students sometimes just watch a mindless comedy movie the night before with your kids or your girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, just to kind of lower that anxiety a little bit, and just don't give in to the temptation of starting to look the cram in the morning, because it just, all that does is raises your blood pressure.
Oh, I
I'm going to
know.
give you a little bit of what we call down south, because I actually live down south. It's called lanyap, and lanyap is a little extra, kind of like a baker's dozen, but don't strive for perfection. Just know that you've got 170 questions. Not that you want to miss any, but you are going to miss some. You are going to see questions on the exam that you just don't have a clue, and you're going to eventually have to guess. Hopefully you can narrow it down to 2 or 3 questions and then give your best guess. But don't strive for perfection, because you're
Mhm.
not going to achieve it. None of us are. And for people like me who are very type A, right, Jim? Um,
No,
it's like,
not you.
I would sit there, oh, I don't know anything about options. And I'm studying over here in retirement planning. And so I'd flip back. It's like, just don't do that. Okay.
Mhm.
You don't have to be perfect. You can miss, several answers and still do fine on the exam. So don't try to be perfect. And that goes along with cramming at the last minute.
Don't do that,
No, don't.
especially the night before. Don't, like Cindy said, we couldn't stress enough. At that point, you're full.
Yeah,
Just take it
seriously.
easy.
Yeah.
And even the morning of, it's really tough to pull out the notes and just start to flip through. Like you said, it can raise
Yeah.
your blood pressure, and
Well,
you go, oh man, I might not really know that. And you'd be surprised when you get into a testing center and you see the question in front of you and you take your time. Your brain has it in it. It's got it in the mental
yeah.
Rolodex. It'll help you find the answer that you need to be successful.
And one other thing on that note is, make sure you eat something in the morning. I was
Yeah.
kind of nervous and I didn't, and I'm literally in the middle of session one. It's like, I'm hungry, and it's like, what do you do then? I know for me personally, when my blood sugar starts to drop and I'm hungry, I can't think as well. I'm not thinking as clearly. So even if you have to get a protein bar into your stomach or a shake or something, a smoothie,
Mm.
make sure you do that to get some nutrients before you go into the first session. Okay.
All righty.
All right, so if you are attending this call and you are not a student with us yet, there are some things that you can look at if you're considering becoming a student for the exam prep program that we offer. First of all, there is a free assessment exam. I'm going to give you the link to this after we go through this. So there's a free assessment exam, which we created as a type of diagnostic, just to give you an idea of what kind of questions you might see on the exam, and also see what kind of topics that you're familiar with and that you know, and which ones you don't. It'll familiarize you with that. There is a webinar coming up on the 5th. That's next week for CFP certification process. We'll walk through that as well. If you can't make that, then you can go to the website and you can see the on-demand video, and you can watch that at your convenience. The only plus to taking the webinar is you can ask questions live there. So that's on the 5th at 12 noon Eastern. We do have a free CFP certification guide that walks you through everything you need to do to be eligible for the exam, and then actually sit and take the exam. And then the ebook covers a study plan that works. And this goes in hand with the study planner checklist, because what we find is if somebody downloads the study planner checklist and you say you work in retirement all the time and you feel pretty knowledgeable about that, sometimes you might want to just spend a little more time on the other topics. So this helps you walk through, customizing a study plan that works for you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're still not sure and you haven't enrolled with us for a review course, there is a trial package that you can have access to for 5 days. You'll get to see pretty much a sample of most of the main components in the study program. You'll get to see what an on-demand class looks like. You'll get to see PDFs of parts of book 1, and then I said the case study book is book 7, so you'll have one for a sample of the topic book and then a sample of the case study book. You will have some Q-Bank questions that you'll be able to run through, samples of those. We do have learning objective videos that really help students who are still struggling with concepts after they've done their study. So this is a reinforcement tool, so we'll have a sample of that for you. Again, the pre-study assessment, you'll be able to take an assessment this one's a 100-question exam. The other one was a 50-question exam that I mentioned in the slide before. You'll be able to actually, again, go through questions to see where your weaknesses and strengths are. You'll get a report at the end showing that, showing your score. And then you'll actually get to see what the study planner checklist looks like. I showed you a little sample today, but you'll be able to see how the components are incorporated line by line through your study planner checklist.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there is the link. If you want to copy that, it's fine. If not, you just go to kaplanfinancial.com to CFP, and then it's under free study materials hyphenated.
Mm-hmm. Now we can turn it over to questions, and we actually have one hiding in the question link, if you will. It says, how much time a day and for how many days does Kaplan recommend studying before sitting for the exam?
Okay, that's a loaded question because it depends on, well, first of all, the scheduling of it depends on your schedule, obviously, but it also depends on where you are in your career journey and how much you actually, know about some of these things. So generally, we recommend that you spend anywhere between 225 hours, maybe up to some 275 for those that are just really starting out in the business and don't really know a whole lot. But you'll see as you start to, get into your groove with the study plan checklist, you'll get a feel for how much you need to study. What I would do personally is when I studied, I didn't study more than 2 hours at a time. I just found like after 2 hours, I was, done. So I try to find, 2-hour increments if I could. If I could do it every day, I did. Unfortunately, my kids were involved in sports, and if it was football, I could study on the sidelines. If it was wrestling, it was way too loud for me to study. So you kind of have to, see how that works for you. But you do have to make the commitment. So be sure you can make that commitment, because if you can't make that commitment, you need to rethink that, because you need to have some time that you can actually commit to studying for this. It's not something you can walk into relatively unprepared. Students have tried that, and then we hear from them and we have to get everybody back on track. So, but that's the baseline, if you will, 225 to upwards of 275.
All right, I got two that are very, very similar. So I'll give you both at the same time. It's about pen and paper and pencils while taking the exam, what they're allowed to use to do notes or to.
Okay, so no pens, no scratch paper, no, not allowed. So everything you have given to you is going to be online. So you're going to have the ability to see all of your formulas in a separate window, all of your tax information in a separate window. The only thing you'll be able to take in, as I said before, is the calculator. So,
all right.
Know that.
What is the deadline to register for remote proctoring? I'm concerned about the scenario where we are not allowed in the in-person exam due to exposure within 14 days of the test. Do we know the deadline to register for remote proctoring?
I think it's the same deadline for the exam, which I believe is September 8th, I believe. Okay. What I would suggest, though, if you are considering remote, that you do that as soon as possible and get your application in there so you can get in the queue, because like I said before, I do believe you're going to be contacted, or you'll be receive an email or something to give additional information. So if that's something that you're seriously considering, I'd go ahead and put your application in now. And then, we're still kind of way out from September. So there is a chance, I would think, that the Prometric testing may not be available. However, having said that, Prometric has taken big steps to socially distance, wipe down they clean in between, on the breaks in between, and do all the other protocols that schools and businesses have to do as well. But again, if it we get a big rash of incidences of COVID again, who's to know?
Mm-hmm. Please remind me of the test scoring process again so I can research it. What was that called?
So it's the modified Angoff theory or the modified Angoff process.
Mm-hmm.
I read about 2 paragraphs of it, and you can get the idea in your mind. It is a statistical thing, but that's what's used for that. And basically, and we use this when we create our diagnostics. We look at the competencies that a financial planner should have, and then what we do is we cross that with the content, and then you look at the questions and you tag them as it's either easy, moderate, difficult, or easy and difficult. They're tagged for difficulty level. And then a cut score is mathematically created. So for every exam, the cut score is different. But anybody that goes above the cut score actually passes. And that's really all I know.
I'm going to put up a slide. We were asked about showing the 5 do's and don'ts again. I'll rewind that to show that up there while I throw this question at you. That we have a gentleman that just started his education with us. Welcome. He's doing the self-study. My goal is to have them completed late December, early January.
Ooh,
Will we have time to complete them and then transition to study mode for the March 2021 exam?
Okay, and I don't want to answer every question. It depends. It is doable.
Yeah.
I mean, I personally went through rather quickly, but I had a lot of time on my hands and I had to make a lot of sacrifices. I'll be perfectly honest. I hate to say this, but I bribed my boys to take them to Six Flags after I passed, if they would just give me some time to study. So I didn't feel great about that, but it's up to you. So it's definitely doable. What you want to do though is when you go through your education is you want to make sure that you're clear on the fundamentals that you're learning there. If you breeze through that too fast, you're going to find that you're going to have to relearn some of that stuff when you get to your exam prep. So make sure that you're not just, taking the quizzes and moving through the exam just to finish it. Make it a learning experience and make sure that you are, in fact, looking at those learning objectives and you do understand fundamentally the concepts, because the learning objectives in the education are also the topics that are tested on the national exam. So my advice to you would be, if you want to go for it, go for it. I would definitely put a plan together on how you want to do that. If you need help doing that, you can send an email to InstructorLink. We can help you do that, but you're going to really have to stick to that. And there's so much going on with, if you have a family with kids going to school, not going to school, that kind of stuff, you got to just realize that you have to make it possible.
Mm-hmm. All right, I got a 3-parter. What I'm going to try to do is send this to you. See if this will work. Yeah.
Okay.
Did you happen to get it?
You chatting it to me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm checking.
If you pop the chat, expand open this. You got it.
I don't
Did
see
you get it?
Nope. Not yet.
No. It says it's sent to you. I can read it to you then.
Okay.
All right. What is the percent of people that pass per testing period? Start there.
Okay, so the pass rates are available for CFP students, just everybody who takes it. The pass rates are available on the website. I believe last cycle, and we have Alicia Christensen with us. She is our enrollment director of enrollment. So Alicia, please feel free to chat me if I don't have this right, but I believe it was in the high 50s, like 58-ish for the last exam. We did have an exam in the past, I think went up to 63, which was really high. And when I took it, it was 53. But it's usually somewhere
in the, it was in the upper 40s.
Oh, wow. Well, that's
I had the hardest test over like 6 sessions.
So it might have been that you guys just didn't study as much.
I just got lucky. All right, second part of that was, what is the percent of people that pass take it the first time? So first time pass rate.
Right. Okay. So first time pass rate, believe it or not, is always higher than second timers. And I just feel as though the reason behind that is that if you don't pass the first time, you kind of feel a little beat up and, you're just not where you need to be in your head. So for first time passers, that's again on the CFP board website, but it's usually higher than the average. So For example, I don't have the figures in front of me, but I think when it was 58, I think it was 63 or 64 for first timers. And then the second timers were a little bit lower.
Right. And you know the third part to the question is,
Yeah.
what's the
Yeah.
percent that use Kaplan pass it?
Okay, so I don't have the specific percentages, but I will say this. I will say that Kaplan is significantly higher than the national. It varies from exam to exam, obviously, depending on, it depends a lot on the commitment of the group that's moving through for that particular exam cycle. It's funny you say that because I can even, when I get questions and I interact with a lot of students, I can tell, and Jim, you probably feel the same way, we can tell how they're going to do on the final exam, I mean, on the national exam based on, the kind of questions, and you can tell when a student studies basically. So, but we are consistently higher than that national average. I don't have the exact percentages for Kaplan though.
Okay. I'm going to paraphrase this next question about study method. The student asked about watching the LO video, then they would watch the on-demand video and then read the chapter of the book. Do you recommend this method?
Okay, so I would not, only because, and we don't have it that way in the study planner checklist.
And just because that's the way he started it, he was waiting for his books to preface that.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Got it start, if you will.
Okay, so here's the rhyme or reason, the way we do it in the study planner checklist. We go to the book first. And the reason we go to the book first is because that's where you get your fundamental knowledge, okay? You're gonna go to a live review, or you're gonna do your on-demand review, and you're not gonna get every single line of the book in that class. There's just not enough time to do that. So if you go to a live online class, say for example, you're gonna have, when you get your live review class guide, and you get that if you have on-demand as well, look through there and you can see what's gonna be covered in the on-demand videos or in the live online class. Having said that, what you're doing is not, I mean, it's very purposeful and it's not a bad idea. It's just that if you start with the foundation for the book, then you move into your on-demand videos, or you move to your classes. And then as you study, whether it's before you go to a live online, or whether it's during or after a live online, or at any point in an on-demand, you go to your learning objective videos. We have those there. There are a lot of them there. And the reason for that is that you can actually pick and choose where you feel you need additional reinforcement and review. So you're not necessarily going to go through all of your LO videos. Hopefully you'll have some of the topics down pat, but that's really used as an after the fact study tool. But what you're doing is not wrong, because you're getting all of the content. It's just when you read the book, you may see some things in the book that you didn't necessarily hear about in the on-demand or in the learning objective video.
Great. All right. I'm going to give you a question while I move back to the link.
What's that?
Student wanted to see the link.
Yeah.
There's the check it out link. Here's the next question. On average, excuse me, during a normal testing time, about how many people sit for the exam?
Okay, and I don't know if you mean in a room itself, or you mean
like nationally.
Okay, it's well over a couple thousand.
Mm-hmm. Does each of the sessions of the exam focus on certain books, topics, or do both sessions cover all the material?
Both sessions cover all the material. So you're going to be going back and forth in between.
Sure.
And because you have a lot of analysis questions where you have to look at situations, you're going to have to kind of go back and forth in your mind when you answer the question. So
we got a student question here that says, prior they would give you a whiteboard if you needed to write notes. Is that no longer allowed?
I think you need to call the ProMetric Center if you're going there. I tend to think not, only because I don't know what they would allow the remote people to use, but they may still be doing that. So I don't have the answer for you, because that wasn't part of the announcement that was made. But I promise if you call ProMetric, they can let you know that. I just don't know how they would do that in a remote setting.
Right. We sort of got two questions that are very similar. So I know how I would answer it. It sort of depends on both. And you'll see the thread here. I'm an experienced CPA, just starting financial planning, sitting for the Series 65 next week. If I start studying for the CFP exam, take the capstone and challenge status path, can I sit for the November exam?
Okay, the answer to that is yes. Here's what you need to think about though. So if you are a CPA, obviously you deal a lot, I would think, not only in the tax part of it, but CPAs kind of branch out into other retirement and that kind of thing as well. It really depends on you. What I would say is if you haven't taken the capstone, that's a requirement. You have to do that. If you get into the capstone and you feel like, I don't know if I know this, you're going to have to put together a financial plan based on questions that are asked. You're going to have to make recommendations. And so if you really don't feel comfortable doing that, I would either say wait till you can study more for that because you don't really have enough of a foundation, or you can, if you want to, I think you can order and if you let us know this, Alicia, if you can order the books can you order the books for education for challenge students? They can just kind of like audit the class and have the books there to refer to. I'm going to wait till Alicia gets back to me on that, but it really depends on you. I mean, people have been on fast courses for CFP, but again, it gets down to that commitment. And even though you have that commitment here, your life may get crazy. And, just think about your job and your family and the holidays and just, the crazy environment we live in now. I mean, for some people, working from home, they've had more time to study. So.
Right. Think about how different everything is 6 months ago.
I know.
All right. Along the same line of thinking, person has a CFA. They just got the review course, studying 2 to 3 hours a day. Would they be ready for the March 2021 exam date?
Okay, yeah, I think so. I mean, as long as you've taken the capstone, because you do have to take that when you challenge, you will know more than you need to know in the investments part of it for sure. And again, with CFAs, some of the stuff you probably will be familiar with, depending on what your role is as a CFA in the other topics as well. So if you do 2 hours a day and you're not going to sit until March, I would say that that's plenty of time. I would also say that if you get to a topic that you're not familiar with, because I find like when I work with CFAs, insurance is usually something that they don't deal with much, so they've got to kind of slow down when you get there. Make sure that you watch the learning objective videos to bring yourself up to speed, and make sure that you listen to the podcast and the high five video for insurance if that's the one that you're studying, because we will give you examples of how you'll be tested on that. So if you don't feel comfortable, just hang out in insurance, for example, a little bit longer.
I'm going to go a little out of order, piggybacking sort of on the question we just got. What is capstone? That was what somebody asked.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so capstone is a requirement. It became a requirement for the CFP exam. It's part of the education requirement for you to sit to it. It's the 7th of the 7 courses that you need to take if you can't challenge the exam. Challenge the exam means that if you're a CFA, if you're a JD, if you are CPA, what is it, CLU, I think a CHFC as well, there are certain designations you can hold that, or education that you've had, that you can, what we call challenge the exam, which means you don't have to meet the requirement for education other than a capstone course. So with the capstone course, the way we do that with Kaplan is we have our 511 course, which is the general principles. We run all the way through to estate planning, which is 516. 517 is your capstone course. You also hear it called the financial plan development course. So what you're doing here is the board is seeing to make sure that you can incorporate what you've learned or the knowledge you have from some other profession into recommendations in a plan. So you'll be given a scenario, a family situation, and then you'll be asked certain questions on which you have to make recommendations. That's the capstone course. So whether you challenge it or whether you go through an education program, you still have to sit for that capstone course. And it's a good thing if you are challenging. If you get to the capstone, it's like, oh gosh, I don't think I know a lot of this stuff. You kind of know your readiness for the exam prep.
Next question, would you recommend the essential review package, or is it just better to purchase the premium package?
Okay, so there are things that are available in the premium that are not available in the essential. One of those things is the high five webinars. You get that in premium, you don't get that in essential. So if you do have, if you buy the essential package, it is less expensive, but if you buy that, you can still use the study planner checklist, and it'll indicate in the study planner checklist for premium purchasers only, or something to that effect. So you'll know that that step is not something that you'll be able to do. So we do have webinars are available to premium students. The mock exam is another big one. If you want to have that mock exam that we offer, the one that you are instructed to take like 3 weeks prior and then get an assessment, that's available through premium. So if you go to the website, you can see the comparison between the two. And if you feel like you know enough and you don't feel like you need to have the reinforcements of a mock exam, of course, I would recommend it. And you don't need to have those high five webinars that we talked about, then you could buy the essential. I would recommend the premium. I think it's well more worth than what it costs, but that's a decision up to you.
All right. I know you said you can't bring a pen or no to pencil and paper, but what about bringing extra batteries for your calculator to the exam?
Okay, so what I think is done in the Prometric world is that you can bring the batteries, but you have to keep them in your locker. You can take breaks while you're in that 3-hour period to, you know, use the restroom or whatever. They'll probably check you out again when you come back in, but the clock still ticks. So if you do bring extra batteries, you can keep them in your locker. What I did was I actually took 2 calculators, so I didn't have to take the time to put the batteries in, and I borrowed a friend's calculator, same model, and I had that, you know, put aside in case I had that issue.
Mm-hmm. Getting back to the capstone, like I said, I'm going a little bit out of order. I took the capstone before estate planning and retirement planning. Will it be okay if they're taken out of order?
Yeah, you can take them out of order. It's not sometimes the easiest thing to do. You certainly can. You're just at a disadvantage if you take the capstone and you haven't really gone through the retirement and estate courses yet, because you're going to have to make recommendations without having gone through that. But you can take the education in any order that you choose to do.
I like this next one. I finished my CFP class a few years ago. Are the live classes or on-demand classes going to feel like a water hose of information, or do they move through it at a good pace?
Okay, so here's the reality of it, and Jim, you'll attest to this, I'm sure too. It used to be when Jim and I took the exam,
Right.
the CFP exam would get pretty deep. I mean, it would drill down into some of these topics to where it got really hairy sometimes when you were trying to, you know, answer a question. What we've seen though over the years is that the board really tightened up their job knowledge requirements, which is their principal knowledge topics, and that they have actually have subtopics under there that they adhere to. And I don't hear that it's as deep anymore. It's more like a shallow water as opposed to a deep pond. If you know those subtopics, you're from, you know, you have the knowledge and you're able to apply it, I don't think it's going to feel like a water hose at all. You're going to have a lot of, if you've taken the education years ago, you've got all of those learning objective videos. Those learning objective videos are all also used in the education courses, so you know that it's the level of education. You also have what we call recall and review questions available to you. You'll be able to look at those. Those are our basic questions. Those aren't intended for you to use to test your knowledge for the national exam, but that's for reinforcement. That's available along with the diagnostic. You'll also have, what else do we have available? I think that's it. But you will have tools available to reinforce, and you're not gonna, I don't think you're gonna drown drinking out of a water hose.
No.
Maybe a little sprinkler coming down a little faster than you like, but you can kind of.
You answered this very similar to a couple other questions. I'm an attorney auditing the course, study 2 hours a day, focusing on the LOs, learning objectives. I'm on the 4th course, looking to sit in March 2021. Is that sufficient time? I watched the online videos as well.
Okay, so the good news is you're getting to the tax course if you're on in 514. And this is where it starts to get a little more difficult, obviously. But if you're studying now, you're in July, you're in a good place. A couple of hours a day is great. What I would suggest you do though is one of 2 things. Either go back on a regular basis, and you can figure out how this works for you. Go back on a regular basis and review some of the content from the earlier education, just to kind of keep it, you know, a little bit front of mind. So when you get to the exam prep, you'll be prepared. Or what some students will do is they'll go through all the classes and then they will, or they'll go through all the content and then they will actually set aside some time before the exam to go back to all the topics. So it's definitely doable.
And along the same breath, if you will, can you give me an idea on how long the capstone will take to complete? I'm finishing up a state course now, wants to sit for the November test.
Okay, so it depends on you. What the capstone course consists of is it can be on demand, or it can be, you can go to 3 live online classes, that's up to you. But basically what you'll do in the first class is go through some of the CFP code of ethics. You'll talk a little bit about how to develop plans and so forth. Second class is you actually go through a sample case to kind of get you up to speed on what you're going to do in the third class. So basically the second class is a sample case. You'll look at some of the questions, the assessment questions, similar to what you'll be asked to do in your actual case that you have to, or your recommendations that you have to write. So that'll give you some good information. And then thirdly, you're going to go through the case study facts for the case that you are going to do for your assignment. So if you've got the time to commit, it usually takes, I don't know, you could probably write what would you say, Jim, write the recommendations in depends on how long you spend, but a couple of days.
Yeah, I don't think that's a problem.
And it depends on how much knowledge you have. If you've got to go back and research some of this stuff because you don't remember it or you're challenging, you may have to do a little bit of that before you can actually finish. But you'd be good for that exam.
Can you provide a strategy for the case study or for a case study?
Yeah, so actually there are two strategies. And what I would recommend, and this is actually in one of the podcasts that I did. So if you listen to that, you'll hear this. But basically there are two approaches, and we always recommend that students choose one and stick with it. So there's one where some people like to look at the case study and they like to read through every little thing and kind of just, look and say, okay, I know that, he's got a child from another marriage, and I know they don't have a will, and kind of make these mental notes. The other way to do it, and this is the way I did it, is I looked at the questions first, because I find that usually at least one, maybe two of the questions really can be answered without looking at the case at all. So I'd rather get those out of the way. So I would go and answer those. And then what I do is I look at the questions to see, it's kind of like looking at I said to look at that last sentence in a question stem. Let me see what they want me to know, because I don't want to go through an entire statement of cash or statement of financial position if I don't really have to answer a question about it, right? Because there's usually 8 to 12 questions, and they can't cover everything. So I like to do that. I like to look at the questions. I don't answer them, but it's like, okay, I've got to pay attention to education planning. I've got to pay attention to estate planning. There's nothing here about retirement, so I don't need to focus on that. And then go back and look at the case study itself, and then just kind of make a mental note of what you need to actually read through for those questions. So it's up to you, whatever you prefer to do.
I agree. I used to read the questions and then go dig through the facts to find the answers.
I mean, to me, it just seems more efficient because you're not doing all this unnecessary reading.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, we've got only 2 more questions. So if anyone else has a question you'd like to send us, feel free. For the final exams for the certification courses that are referring to FP 511, 512, and so on, are they proctored? No, right? They're not proctored. No. I can answer that. Is there any additional information to be aware of for those? And I would say no.
So just if you haven't taken education course with us, just the way it works is that you have modules. Most of the courses have 8 modules. I think 512 has 6, but you have a module quiz for every module. And the module quiz is not graded, but it's scored to let you know how you're doing. And then you have to take a quiz before you can progress to the next module. So to make sure that you just do that knowledge check. I know this, I know this, I know this, and then you can take the final exam. But the final exam score is your score for the entire course.
Right. This is a good one. We have a student that actually did FPQP. You're familiar with FPQP, one of our professional designations on basic financial planning. Yep. About a year before beginning to study the CFP materials. So congratulations on doing the FPQP. With a large portion of the exam based on book 1, which I didn't use due to FPQP, will a review course offer sufficient review materials, or would you recommend I purchase book 1 and go through it?
Okay, so that's a good question for me, because I actually teach FFPN, and I finished one of the class last night, as a matter of fact. So you've taken FFPN, and basically you need to know if you need book 1 or not. So you've covered, for the most part in FFPN, you have covered your education planning. You've talked about the credits, and you've talked about some of the funding mechanisms. So that's all in book 1. The one thing we didn't do in detail was the actual coded standards. We really didn't dig into that in FFPN. However, having said that, you can download the code and standards from the website and read through it yourself and familiarize yourself with the steps and what the requirements are under each step and so forth. The only other thing I can think of that wasn't covered in FFPN that is covered in book 1 is just basic economics, supply, curve, demand curve, GOP, GDP, that kind of thing. And that thing, I think you can actually, if you have the Q Bank, you can actually go through questions on that to kind of see how you are with those types of questions. But other than that, we cover just about everything in FFPN that we do in book 1.
Right. And for clarification, FFPN and FPQP are the same.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, they
Would you
are. I'm
like
sorry. Yeah.
would you
Yeah.
like to
So
describe
FFPN is
briefly
of course,
what that is? We had a
yeah,
student ask us what that designation
no,
is.
it's a great designation to have. It's a very solid foundational course, and I think we probably have some of the students on the call today who will
Mhm.
attest that it gives you a great introduction to financial planning. So if you haven't, if you're thinking of going into financial planning or changing your career, or just want to know more about basic financial planning, there are a lot of people that take it just so they know it for themselves and they can do some planning for themselves. But it covers the basic areas that the CFP exam covers just on a very touch the surface kind of a level. But book 1 is it's not a real deep type of educational experience. The only other thing I'm thinking now is in FPQP, FFPN, we don't go through consumer behavior. So we don't have biases and that kind of thing, communication, which would be section 2 of book 1. So you may want to make sure that you go through the questions in the recall and review and in the analyze apply on that. And we do have, that is mentioned when we do the high five webinar. So.
And someone said, and yes, FPQP or FFPN is a wonderful place to start. So we're glad that you shared that comment with us. This is a great question to wrap up our day together and our time together. We really appreciate that, myself and Cindy, that you've attended today. This is a good one. I need advice for mental focus when I sit down to study. With stress in the world and distraction, my mind wanders. Now, how do you create that space? And even us working from home, remotely, creating that environment to be able to focus. I mean, it's tough. It can be tough.
Okay, so here's what I've told students to do because they've heard back from them and they've actually said it works. So, the world's a crazy place and we've got all of this politics and the COVID and all this going on. So the first thing I recommend is stay away from, as much as you can, away from news stories. I mean, you got to keep up to date what's going on in the world, but don't sit there and watch. I mean, my husband loves to sit there and watch all kinds of news programs all day long, and he wonders why he's depressed by the end of the day. That'll take away your mental health. Seriously.
Exactly.
And then, I mean, there's a lot going on in your life. There's COVID. I know if you're a parent, you're trying to figure out how is your child going to go back to school and that kind of stuff. So try to minimize the types of the news shows that you watch. I'm serious about that. The other thing is what I find to do, and Jim and I have kind of already said this, find something that relaxes you. For me, which sounds counterintuitive, it's coffee. So to have a nice steaming cup of coffee next to me and the aroma of the coffee relaxes me, right? Also, if you have children, I know that you think you can say, okay, go, play this and I'm going to study. I find that it's worth it to me to get one of the neighborhood kids to take them out for a walk and ride bikes and that kind of stuff while I study, or I leave and I have somebody come in. That was worth it for me. But you do have to take a lot of deep breaths. I know some people actually have, and the best playlist for Amazon Music, the vote has been done, and it's called Sleepy Time Music. Doesn't put you to sleep. It's just it's songs that you know, but it's on a pace to where you really find that you're kind of calming down a little bit. Play it really, really low in the background. I personally wouldn't recommend having earbuds in. I just feel like that's too much coming at you. If that works for you, that's fine. But use this as an opportunity to further your career, or to just make yourself better educationally, because you've got the opportunity. Most of you aren't going down to an office and having that rat race of commuting and that kind of stuff. So a lot of students have been very successful, even with the uncertainty. But those few tips they've used, lighting's another thing. Don't have a bright light on. Some students like to have a light that focuses just on their book or their computer or whatever, and have the other lights off. And so they've got that focus with a soft light. So, I mean, that's not really technical advice, but it actually does work. Some people like to study, in their sweatsuits, you know. I have to say there's probably a lot of pajama studying going on too, whatever you're comfortable in.
Exactly. You see the sales of ice cream and I think chocolate are up while personal care products are down of
Oh
all
my
things
gosh.
during the pandemic. It's happen to see that, but I would agree. It's creating a comfortable environment. As you can see behind me, I've created pretty much a sports memorabilia environment in my home office. Um, Distractions, yeah, I've got a dog and I've got a kid running around, and sometimes friends come over, the phone rings or something, along those lines goes on. But it's finding that balance between getting, what you got to get done during the day, and then also taking, some you time where Cindy knows I go in my workout room in the garage, and I'll try to get in, an elliptical or some, weight training or something in too, just to clear the mind. And I would concur about the news stuff that when this all started, I was watching quite a bit of TV, and you're on the internet looking up all the numbers and the graphs and the charts and this, that, and the other thing. And once I started backing that down too, and taking a little more deep breath, walking the dog in the morning, just shutting it down, or finding other distractions that are things that you like to do,
You think
in
I'm crazy,
addition to
but I like jam.
studying.
So I'll just put on some good music and start to jam for a little while. It just brings me
All
to a
right.
better place.
I
Yep.
put on my 80s music. So that's two of the questions. We got another question, so I had to put my readers back on. How much time should we be allocating? Oh, we got another one. Be allocating to reading textbook versus quizzes, tests for maximum efficiency. And that's sort of a up to you question, where you go, and how you study. But Cindy, how would you?
Yeah, so what a lot of students do, and I did this myself, is, I go through the book. Again, you saw how I love my highlighters, right? So I always have those at hand.
Mhm.
And it depends, like Jim said, on where your strengths and weaknesses are. I like to go through, love the format of the books. It's an outline format, so I love to go through and say, okay, yes, I got that. Let me see this. And sometimes I'll even stop at one of the lines and say, okay, what would follow this? Like I'll say, the 5 reasons for this, and I try to formulate my mind and see if I got it right and that kind of thing. But
Mhm.
what I do is I highlight in certain colors the things I need to go back to that I don't feel that comfortable with. Other stuff I don't highlight, I feel more comfortable with that. And the only way I'll go back to that immediately is if I don't do well on the Q bank on
Mhm.
that. So I may go back and look at it because I may need to study it more. But I know a lot of students kind of want to skip the reading or want to try to
Mhm.
minimize the reading. But that's the only way you're really going to absorb this. To try to learn by taking questions, you're not going to be able to do that well, because there's no way, even though we're good, there's no way, and the board is good, we can think of every single type of question that may be written for that particular topic. So you need to have that knowledge in there so you can connect those dots.
All right, the tools of the trade.
Yeah. So
They
now we've
fix-
all got these
yeah, keep
colored
different.
pencils. Maybe it's a professor.
Yeah, we do enough research as part of our daily
Yep.
efforts to stay abreast and create the testing material we can for you. So we all use our colored pencils and pens and highlighters to do our research too. But that's it. That's all the questions we've got. We've answered everything. I'd like to personally thank everyone for coming. I wish you good luck, in your studies and your commitment to lifelong learning. And Cindy, would you like to wrap her up for
Yeah,
us?
so this has been great. I always like to be able to, talk to students. If you have any questions at all, you have an instructor link. If you are enrolled, you have your instructor link tab that you can click on and reach any of the professors in the college that actually help with CFP. If you're not enrolled, I welcome you to consider that. You can call Alicia Christensen or somebody on her team. She, again, is the enrollment team. We do have a lot of information on the website, whether you are a student or you're not a student. If you're thinking about it, again, you can look at the different packages and that kind of thing. If you need any advice, please reach out to Alicia's team.
Mhm.
If Alicia needs to contact one of us, she can certainly do that, and you'll get the answer they need if it's about content or something like that that you need to reach us. So thank you so much for coming. These webinars, I just enjoy them, and they're so much fun, and we enjoyed having you. So take care and have a great week.
Yep.
Thanks.
Take care, everybody. So long.